Well, hello. Welcome to our podcast and our live cast. Today, I have a special treat for you. A really wonderful gentleman with a more wonderful story about a wonderful facility and movement that was created in Louisville, Kentucky. And this isn't a local interest story. First, I'm not in Louisville and don't live in Louisville, so it certainly wouldn't be local to me. But this is a story really of national interest and more, because what they have created is a model that can be carried through every city. And so I want to bring on here our author today, and that's Jay Davidson. And Jay is the author of Miracle on Market, Where Hope is Found and Change Happens. Jay, welcome to the Livecast. How are you? Miracle on Market, Where Hope is Found and Change. Oh, I hear you're watching. Are you watching me on Facebook, Jay? Do the Livecast. How are you? Miracle on Market, Where Hope is Found. Jay, you're going to want to turn me off on Facebook if you're watching me on Facebook. Do the Livecast. How are you? Miracle.
Yep.
There we go. Are we better now?
Yes.
Okay, very good. Well, Jay, how are you today? This is your book launch day. This is really exciting times.
Oh, I'm really excited. It is launch day, but it's a long time coming, 2 years in the work, and a lot of fun. Got started in it really struggling in the beginning, and as I got into it, it became easier and easier and easier to write. So I just kind of really fell into it. It was a lot of fun.
Well, today is a long time is a long time coming, not just because of the process of, creating and writing and publishing a book, but the story that got you to this point, right?
Yes.
This is truly a long time coming. So for the benefit of our listeners and watchers, if you would, please, I want to know more about you. But before we get there, I also want to tell people that the book that we're talking about is available on Amazon today. And in fact, you can pick it up for 99 cents if you're listening or watching this on launch day. You can get the Kindle version for 99 cents, and the paperback is there as well. And then if you're participating in the live cast, please also put in any comments, ask questions, cheer Jay on, or ask questions about him or his organization or his book, and we'd be happy to address those. All right, Jay. So tell us your story. Let's get into this, because I'm excited for people to hear this.
Well, it seems like God's been working in my life from the very, very early childhood all the way through my life experiences, ups and downs, and all the way into seniorhood. Actually, I guess the simplest way is to say that I spent 20 years in the military, retired, and then I've spent 30 years reaching out to helping suffering alcoholics and addicts. And how that all has transpired is in the book of Miracle on Market. And during my time before I got to the healing place, I was involved in a lot of different things. I got a lot of different assignments in the military. One of the things that's really interesting is that I got sober while I was in the military. I was about 17 years in active duty, and it was when my alcoholism really hit bottom, and I ended up having to get confronted by my boss, and he told me that I needed to get sober. He was going to kick me out of the Army, and so was my surrender to my higher power and hitting my knees and asking for help, and ended up going into a 12-step program and getting sober. And through that process, you have to understand that 20 years in the Army, I spent 20 years in the infantry, and that's all about people and helping people, and you're only as good as the people that you serve. And so I was always committed to helping serve others. And then shortly after retirement, I ended up as a military advisor in Saudi Arabia and helping the Saudis there do work on their military operations plans. And during that time, got involved in the underground Christian church there in Saudi, and that was my time in the desert with my higher power. And that's when I really got committed to reaching out and helping other people as well. And when I came back from Saudi Arabia, looking for a job, I really found out I was overqualified for most jobs that were available. So I decided to go back to school and get my degree in social work, and got a master's in social work. Hadn't graduated from the Kent School at U of L, and after graduation, I needed to pay tuition. So there were these doctors that were operating this homeless shelter down on 10th and Market, and they needed a director to come in and run the shelter for them. And I knew that with my military experience in logistics, I could do that. So they hired me, and they knew that I would be able to run that shelter, but weren't too worried about any kind of social work activities. And they just let me run with it. And so in December of 91, I became the director of the JCMS outreach program, referred to on the street by the Morgan Center. Through all of this, there was my God just guiding me through. And every time I made a mistake, he turned it into a solution. So it's been a really interesting ride.
Wow. The experiences that you've had in the military and the skills you developed there, transferring into the management of the center, it makes so much sense, but I don't hear that all the time. And like the way you say it, it's almost like, well, yeah, of course, that would be the perfect use. But wow, what a blessing.
One of the stories in the book is about my time as a brand new second lieutenant taking over command of my rifle platoon in Vietnam, and scared to death about not worried about keeping the men alive, accomplishing the mission. And the short story is that we were on patrol, and we took a break for lunch, and it just happened to be near a stream in the jungle, and the guys went over to the stream to take a break, and there were some ladies on the other side of the stream that invited them over to have some fun. And I thought that was a very bad idea. So I said no, packed everybody up, and we moved out. Well, it turns out later that evening, the 4 squad leaders came to me and said, we think you really care about us and keeping us alive. So if you'll listen to us, we'll train you and teach you how to keep us alive while accomplishing the mission. So I said, I would be glad to learn. So that's one of the main points I've learned about. Let people teach me what I need to know.
I think that's powerful, because what you're saying is, in this case, your subordinates, you gave your subordinates permission to train you in what they knew to make you a better leader of them.
Right.
That's powerful. That's powerful. Does that continue? Do you continue to give your subordinates the authority to train you?
Absolutely. That's the only way to do it. Surround myself with smarter people, more capable people than me. And actually, and the other part of it is walking into the Morgan Center in December 19th, 1991, I knew nothing about homelessness. I knew nothing about welfare, except that I knew that my soldiers had to get food stamps because we weren't paying them enough to put food on their table. But that was about it. And that's when I learned that, since I didn't know anything about what I was walking into, I let all the men in the shelter teach me what they needed, what they wanted, how they wanted to be treated. And as they were treated with dignity and respect, they gave back dignity and respect, and were able to share with me what they really needed and wanted to be successful. And that's when I realized that a significant number of the men on the street that were using the Morgan Center were addicted to alcohol and drugs. And I realized that, for me, I was 8 years sober at that point, and I knew that the only thing that worked for me was a 12-step program and accountability and fellowship of that 12-step program. And it was a program of attraction. And so I knew that if the men didn't get sober, they would never get off the street. So I guess since I didn't know any better, we were just going to start out and try to do something. I didn't recreate anything that was already in existence. So it was the men teaching me how they wanted the program to be set up. It was pretty interesting.
So let's get into that. Let's get into the Miracle on Market. Tell us the story of the healing place. Tell us how it came about and what it's become.
Well, very quickly, when I came into the Morgan Center, they had the overnight shelter, and then they had a building across the street, 1017, 1019 West Market, that was in bad need of repair and renovation. And there was money set aside for that. And I decided that I needed, now that we have an overnight shelter, we needed a sobering up center, if you will. And so I was able to get money together through grants and donations to come back and have Jesse Bollinger renovate the building. And when we got that opened up in September of '92, we now had two outreaches to the street. First was the overnight shelter, and second was the drunk tank, or the sobering up center, 24 beds. So I figured, well, now it's time to start a recovery program. So this is October 1992, election year, which is Bush versus Clinton the same time around. And of course, all of us know what October's like when it's the month before elections. And so all the news, all the articles were, the newspapers were about election news. And so the first Monday in October, I decided that from my limited social work experience, I knew that I should not mix drinking men with non-drinking men. And that, because that would cause relapse and fights and all that kind of problems. And so I decided that we were going to make the Morgan Center an alcohol-free and drug-free center. So Monday night at 4 o'clock or 3:30, when I did check-in, and I checked in 80 guys, and every time I could tell that there was alcohol on their breath, I would say, I'm not going to check you in tomorrow because this is going to be an alcohol-free shelter. And they said, okay, fine. So I checked in the 80 men. Tuesday night, it was time to check in the 80 men, and I looked out there, and there were only 50. And I said, well, where are the other 30? And they said, well, you said if you smell like alcohol, you're not going to check them in. So they went somewhere else. Well, I said, okay, fine. That night, I got calls from all 4 shelter directors in the city saying, what's going on down at the Morgan Center? You kick these guys out. They don't know where to go. They can't get into our shelter. You're creating all kinds of problems. What's going on? I said, well, we're just trying to start a recovery program for alcohol and drugs. So they said, fine. So I thought it was all over, but it wasn't. It was just beginning, because 9 o'clock the next morning, right out on Market Street, right in front of the 1020 West Market, there were homeless men walking up and down the street carrying petition signs saying, doctors, shelters, rules unfair, shut out the homeless. And they even had homeless guys out in the middle of the street passing out handbills.
Oh my gosh.
It was crazy. Well, since the Morgan Center at that time was primarily supervised, the board was primarily doctors. They got a little nervous about that publicity, because I had all 4 TV stations and both newspapers down to the Morgan Center at 11 o'clock saying, what on the world is going on around here? How can the doctors be so cruel to kick these men out of the shelter? Don't they know any better about homelessness? Well, that caused the chairman of the board to have an emergency meeting of the executive committee the next night, Thursday night. There are 9 members on the executive committee, but 18 doctors showed up for that discussion, and they argued for about 2 hours, wet versus dry, dry versus wet. And so Dr. Ward finally took a vote. 9 voted wet and 9 voted dry. So I did the typical military tap dance and said, well, because I didn't want to lose this. And I said, well, maybe we can do both. Maybe I can have wet and dry, but I need to hire some more staff and do some rearranging. They said, well, how much money would you need? And of course, I didn't have any idea. I just took a swag. That's a silly, wild ass guess. And I said, about $100,000 will do it for the first year. And they said, okay. And they went out and raised the money. And so what happened was 1020 was a 2-story building, 24,000 square feet, 12,000 square feet on each floor. So the top floor was wet and the bottom floor was dry, and the bottom floor became the beginning of the recovery program. That's become the core and the essence of the healing place. And that remains to this day the core foundation of the healing place model. We have a wet shelter for overnight. We have the sobering up center, the detox, and then we have the abstinence-based long-term recovery program.
Wow. I'm pretty impressed that was a turning point, obviously, and I'm pretty impressed that you had the option to do both, like that was even a thing.
Well, the doctors were willing to take a risk. I was willing to take a risk, and we didn't have anybody telling us how to do it or why we couldn't do it. And so we decided to just try to do something that was different.
Wow, that is incredible. So tell me about the healing place now, because what it was then and what it is now, I understand, are slightly different.
Slightly. When we started, there was um, uh, 80 beds. 10 men were started in the recovery program. The annual budget in 93 to 94 was about $300,000. Today, over the year's growth, it's 30 years old now. So we now have 1,000 beds filled every day, and we have a $10 million annual budget. We still have the same success rate that we did in the early years, and it still costs less than $30 per person per day. And all the services are provided at no cost to the client.
Incredible. And how many beds now?
1,000.
1,000 beds.
Right. Between three campuses, Campbellsville, the women's campus at 15th and Hill, and the men's campus at 10th and Market.
This is incredible. Now, let me take a step back for just a second to remind everybody that the book Miracle on Market, which is where you'll find all of this story and the model, is available now on Amazon. You can pick up the paperback or the Kindle. It's there. The paper or the Kindle right now is 99 cents, and definitely recommend you pick this up today. So coming back here, hang on just a second. There we go. All right. So Jay, tell us about the model as it applies to other facilities. And then I'm going to get to a story. I've been told I need to ask you about the carnival.
Okay.
So we can either talk about the carnival now and the model later, or the model now and the carnival later. Which would you prefer?
The model is the same today as it was back in 1993 when we started the recovery program. It's a 12-step program, meaning we use the principles of 12 steps to teach men and women how to learn how to live a sober life. But we do it through mutual help and peer support. In other words, one alcoholic reaching out and helping another alcoholic learn how to change. They're sharing their experience, strength, and hope on how they've been able to change a character defect, and they share that with the alcoholic that's struggling. And the other part of it is that unconditional love with no expectation. You see, I learned early on in my life that love always hurt and it always costs something. But in recovery, there's this phenomena of unconditional love that says, I love you in spite of the fact that you made me mad yesterday, and I'm going to help you because I love you enough to want you to live. And so I'm going to share my experience with you to help you. That's rare. The other one is the accountability. And accountability is important for alcoholics and addicts to be held accountable for their behavior and be willing to be held accountable for that behavior. And so we have the community meeting that meets 3 days a week, where men and women hold each other accountable for their inappropriate behavior and give strength-based suggestions on how to change that behavior. And those are the two powerful forms of the mutual help, peer-driven residential long-term recovery program. The other part of it is you have enough time to allow change to happen. Change takes time. And it's not only enough to know what you need to change, you need to have the time to practice this new behavior so it becomes a habit. And that's what can happen at the healing place. Because generally to go through the classes and the curriculum of the 12-step program, it takes about 6 months to 9 months to go through that process. And so you have plenty of time to be held accountable and learn how to change your behaviors and then practice those new behaviors to give you a successful transition into recovery back into the community. Every alcoholic and addict I have met is intelligent, creative, sensitive, focused, and driven, and can do anything they put their minds to. They just couldn't show up every day. But now in sobriety, you look out, they become the best employees, the best volunteers, the best mothers, fathers, sons, and daughters, the best community leaders, you name it, they can do it, and they do. And so that's the power of this model. We want to sustain their recovery once they leave the healing place. We still have a high success rate of men and women staying sober once they leave the healing place, and so that's kind of the highlights of the recovery program.
Wow. Okay, so let's get to this carnival story. Marla told me, Marla on your team said I'm supposed to ask you about the carnival.
Right. Well, I got sober in 1983, and then the general that was going to kick me out of the Army is the same general that promoted me to lieutenant colonel. So I served 3 years remaining on my 20-year term. And getting close to the 20-year mark, I realized that maybe my Army career was pretty well finished, and I had this opportunity with my wife and I to go visit her friends that owned a carnival in the Kentucky State Fair in Louisville. And we had such a fun experience with that. We thought, man, that's really a lot of fun. I didn't think any more about it. But 2 months before I was about ready to retire, the owner of that carnival called me and said, I would really appreciate it if you consider coming to work for me and learning how to operate the carnival, because I want to run parallel shows through the small county fairs. And I thought, we're working a carnival. Let me think. Well, gee, it looks like it's an organization that has its own command structure, its own mess hall, its own power generating system, its own transportation, its own maintenance. Actually, the only thing they don't have is water, and that's achievable every time you go into a new town and hook up to the water supply. So, it kind of looks like a carnival's like an infantry battalion, which is what I've been working with for the last 20 years. That sounds like kind of fun. So I retired to join the carnival. My leadership in Washington, D.C. thought I was crazy. They didn't believe it at first, but then my going away party, they made this nice big cake with the carnival decorations all over it, and they wished me good luck. And during the carnival time, we would move every 7 to 10 days, and there was a lot of downtime on the front end of that week. And so I would be walking around talking to the ride jocks. They're the guys on the lowest part of the totem pole, and I'd befriend them, and I'd be playing AA tapes and Christian music out of my fifth wheel trailer, and just kind of really getting to know the guys. And it turns out that walking down the midway one day, they all started calling me boss. Well, the problem is I learned quickly that there's only one boss on the midway, and it wasn't me. It was the owner. And he got a little jealous about it, did everything he could to make me quit. And of course, I still had my alcoholic ego says that, by God, and my military ego says, by God, I never quit anything in my life, and I'm not going to start now. And he did everything, literally did everything he could. Gave me a ride to put up and down that was the worst one on the midway, and I still made that a success. That pissed him off. So finally, he just said, we pulled into the parking lot at the fairgrounds at Huntsville, Alabama, and I hadn't even dropped my fifth wheel trailer yet. And he just pulls up and says, don't bother to drop your trailer. You're fired. You can go over to the motel on the other side of the fence. And so that I have the distinction of being the only carny getting fired from the carnival.
Well, by the way, you've got a fan here who says, and that's Kathy Fyock, who says that she does love your circus stories and carnival stories. So that is terrific. And she actually made the comment here. Yes, an infantry battalion and a carnival were the perfect career path for founding a rehabilitation facility. Yeah, of course. This is one flows naturally from to the other, right?
Well, now that Kathy mentions that, I didn't make that complete connection, but she's absolutely right, because it was the same people.
Well, now that's an interesting part. Some of are you talking about carnies and
yes,
and that type of thing?
Yes,
really excellent. I mean, that experience with them helped prepare you for the experience in the facility.
Correct.
Wow.
Nothing happens by accident. I learned that a long time ago. Nothing happens by accidents, and miracles happen every day. Most of us are too busy to see them, but I'm blessed because I get to see miracles every day at the healing place.
Wow. Chris said, and let me put this comment up. She says, you mentioned in your book that you keep the focus of the program simple and eliminate as many outside distractions as possible. What are some of the practical ways that you eliminate those outside distractions?
Well, before COVID, we didn't allow cell phones. Before the cell phones, it was pagers, and before pagers, it was handheld phones. We eliminated those. We tried the front end of the program in the motivational track. We really kind of controlled the flexibility of the client, because they're actually restricted to the property for the most part. They have freedom to go from during the day to go to classes to our outside campus for classes, but when they come back at 4:30, they're restricted to the property until the next morning. In other words, they can't leave that evening. So for the first 60 days, they're kind of intentionally kept together so that they can start building relationships and bonding with each other and starting to get to know each other. And the other part of that motivational opportunity is when they walk to that outside classroom. It happens for the men, it happens to be 2 miles away. For the women, it's 1.5 miles. But during that trudging, that's walking with a purpose, you're actually learning how to build relationships, learning how to trust each other, holding each other accountable. When you want to think like, I need to go see my drug dealer, then your buddy will say, no, man, you don't want to do that. You're already invested this much time in your program. Don't do that. That would be really stupid. So a lot of that synergy occurs when you're bonding, walking down to the classroom and back. And then that continues on when you come back to the campus and you're all in the same general area for spending the evening. And again, you continue the discussions of what happened in class today that you disagreed with the instructor because he doesn't know what he's talking about. He doesn't know me as an addict or an alcoholic. And that's typical of someone in early recovery that feels like they're unique. And so there's lots of opportunities, and that restriction to the property for that 60 days really helps them stay focused and focused on really, as I say, stop the world. It gives me time to think about what's going on and how I need to change. And the more we can get the alcoholic and addict to realize that they are self-sufficient and can make it on their own and not relying on mom or dad or other family members or other supports, and really that they need to learn how that they are capable of being independent. And during that 60 days, they start learning that.
All right. This is really incredible. Thank you for sharing these stories. And excited also about just the word getting out about Miracle on Market, and really to help carry what you guys have done in Louisville to other cities across the nation and other countries as well. The homelessness and addiction are problems that are not going away anytime soon, I'm afraid.
Yeah, I was in Germany and in Russia twice, and alcoholics are the same around the world. They're even in Saudi Arabia, even though alcohol is banned in Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, and that's got to be a really scary place to be. I mean, it's just a scary place to be an alcoholic anywhere, but scary, got to be really terrifying there. Well, Jay, we want to thank you here at Ignite Press for trusting us with your content and your message. It has been an absolute joy for us to work with you and with your team. I still go back to the very first conversation we had. Kathy Fayok, who, by the way, is a phenomenal book coach, and I would recommend anybody talk with Kathy about writing a book. When Kathy first introduced us, I was like, oh my gosh, this guy's amazing. This would be so great. And I just hope I get the honor of working with him. And then here we are. And, it's really been a terrific journey. So Jay, any last thoughts before we sign off here? And and wrap up our live cast?
Well, and the last thing I want to say is that initially I thought I was going to write this book to reach out to alcoholics and addicts, but as I got into it, I realized that that was not really the motivation for the book. The book was written, one, to preserve the model, to make sure that in perpetuity it would exist, because I really believe it's a sustainable model. But more importantly, it's written so that families out there struggling with someone who's dealing with an addict or alcoholic in their family can get some insight into the challenges and the frustrations that alcoholic or addict's going through, and that there is hope for recovery for every alcoholic and addict. And in a larger sense, it's a book to the community to talk about what recovery looks like and why recovery is so strongly supportive of community, because of men and women going into recovery back into the community. And so I wanted to, because the community at large knows what addiction looks like. They see it on the news and TV all the time, but it's difficult for them to recognize recovery. And so I kind of wanted to make sure that the business world out there knows that recovery can happen, and it does work.
Thank you so much. And thanks just for the work that you've done for these, not just in the military service, which is impressive enough, but the time that you have spent working with the addicted, working with the homeless, working with those people who need the assistance. We're just grateful for it. And I'm glad you highlighted really who the book is for, because I also remember back to our first conversation where we talked about that. Who is this for? And you said, you know what? It's for the alumni of the organization. It is for families who are who are dealing with these issues.
Right.
It is for other community leaders, and for philanthropists, for those people who would look at this and go, gosh, we need to emulate this model, or we need to create something like this. And those are every one of those is powerful, and I'm just grateful that you've put this together. So everybody, if you would, make sure to pick up your copy of Miracle on Market, available on Amazon, 99-cent Kindle special going on now. Paperback is also available, and make that happen. So Jay, thank you again for coming on the live cast. You've done amazing things, and keep it up. This is not over yet.
Well, thank you, Everett, and thank you for Ignite Press. You've been wonderful to work with and great support.
Thank you, and you've been an absolute joy. All right, well, let's sign this thing off. Again, Everett O'Keefe here from Ignite Press. Thanks for joining us. If we can ever help you get your message out to the world and help you create and publish and launch a book and even become a best-selling author, we are here for you. And you can always find us through our website at ignitepress.us. That's ignitepress.us. All right, take care and God bless.